Hello, Washington Liberty Science students. This is your science project lesson on writing the introduction for your science project. The purpose of a science project introduction. The goal of your introduction is to make your readers, number one, want to read your paper, and number two, to give them enough background to understand the experiment. And the introduction should include in this order. First, number one, the relevance of the project. Why is it worth doing? This is something that basically addresses the first goal. They make them want to read your paper. Why is it interesting? Number two, overview of the existing knowledge on the project. Now, this is really important, and students tend to not give this enough time and space in their introduction. We want to understand why you made the hypothesis that you did, the background that helps us understand what the problem is, but also why you made your hypothesis. So this part is very important. Oftentimes introductions are all just about relevance, what a bad problem acid rain is, or global warming or something, or stream testing, but they don't give enough information about the existing knowledge that allows you to make your hypothesis, the science. So be sure you have a robust section on that. And number three, explanation of the purpose of the project, including the specific question, hypothesis, and experimental design. And this is the way you sort of frame the project and tell people exactly what you're doing. It should be a carefully edited 2 to 4 pages long. Be concise and precise. A goal of scientific writing is to communicate scientific information clearly and concisely. Hyperbole, flowery, ambiguous, wordy, and redundant language run counter to the purpose of this type of writing. So be sure that this introduction is well edited, contains everything it needs, and is to the point. So let's just talk about each of the particular sections. So number one, the relevance of the project. To open your paper, the first 1 to 2 paragraphs should address why your paper is meaningful and worth doing. This will be similar to what you wrote for your rationale and your research plan. A strategy to do this is to try to use one, but really just one of the following. Number one, you could open with a compelling story. Number two, you could include a strong quotation or a vivid, perhaps unexpected anecdote. Number three, you could pose a provocative or thought-provoking question. Number four, you could describe a puzzling scenario or incongruity. Or number five, you could cite a stirring example or case study that illustrates why the research problem is important. Again, I want to stress, this is only 1 to 2 paragraphs. This should not be your entire introduction. You're trying to get the reader interested in why this project and paper is meaningful and worth doing. Note, only choose one strategy for engaging your reader and avoid giving an impression that your paper is more flash than substance. So here's an example of how you might illustrate the relevance of a project. So from a paper. As a result of human activity, climate change has accelerated significantly over the last century. In fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported an increase in global temperature of this much and estimates an additional 3 to 4% increase over the coming century should no further efforts be made to combat it. Over the past summer in particular, here's our relevant anecdote here, the impact of climate change has been painfully clear. Massive heat waves have occurred, particularly in the western United States, that set all-time temperature records in several locations. This is especially notable given heat waves are one of the leading weather-related causes of death in the United States. So this project is on urban heat islands, on reducing, just looking at the problem of global temperature warming. So this is a pretty compelling reason why this would be an interesting project to do. And number two is an overview of existing knowledge. This really should be the meat of the introduction. The next 3 to 5 paragraphs should address important background information necessary to understand your project and your hypothesis. This requires research from multiple reliable, reputable sources, and you should include the following: the historical development of your topic, including the confirmations, conflicts, and gaps in existing knowledge, a discussion of related research in the literature that is similar to your study or that your study will build upon. Number three, a review of factors that are important to understand about both the independent and the dependent variables. This should include research on potential dangers of chemicals and equipment used and ways to mitigate them. And then 4, at least 5 in-text citations from your peer-reviewed scholarly sources in your bibliography to support your claims. And excellent papers will have at least 2 citations from peer-reviewed sources. Now, we've gone over this before, but it bears repeating. So you must have 5 peer-reviewed or scholarly in-text citations from 5 different peer-reviewed scholarly sources in your introduction. I want to just emphasize, so you can have in-text citations, several from the same source, but you do need 5 different peer-reviewed sources cited in your introduction. So you can have more than 5 citations, but at least 5 have to be from different sources. So what does peer review mean? Peer review means that the editors send it out to experts and scholars in the field, i.e. the author's peers, to review and critically evaluate the article on quality, importance, and appropriateness to the journal. Most peer-reviewed articles present primary or new research. You may also use as one of your 5 secondary or scholarly research. While this does not present new research, it does provide a compilation or evaluation of previously presented material, new research, which can be very helpful to student researchers, particularly those doing research for the first time. These are summaries of previous peer review. For an excellent paper, at least 2 of these, you should be able to get some peer-reviewed journal articles. Now, we've talked about this before, examples of peer-reviewed versus scholarly versus non-scholarly. Peer-reviewed are journal articles of original new research. Scholarly, on the other hand, are scientific articles summarizing research or data, such as from Scientific American, Discover, Annual Review of Genetics, things that summarize other peer-reviewed sources. Encyclopedia entries and entries from most reference books are considered scholarly. Textbooks are. Websites can be scholarly, and they usually are if they're from government or educational entities like .gov or .edu. If you're not sure, check with a teacher or librarian. Now, non-scholarly, and this is a lot of why we want you to use the library databases. Anything that you Google, you're going to find some .coms and other popular publications that are not reviewed by scientists in the field. They can be used as sources of your anecdotes, for example, for your relevance of your project, but they are not counted towards your 5 sources. And as I think you know, Wikipedia is never an acceptable source. Okay, the third part of your introduction. So you've got the relevance, you've got the background information. The third part is really just a final paragraph so that after I've seen all this, you're summarizing your experimental design, okay? So the final paragraph should include all of the following. Go back and clearly state what your research question is. Clearly state the specific hypothesis and null hypothesis, and be sure you have a because statement. The reason for the hypothesis must be clear and explained from the knowledge presented. It cannot be a random guess. All right, a list of the independent variable groups and identification of the control if applicable. The dependent variables with proper units, and the importance constants. That is, other variables that could really have an effect on the results. These should be non-trivial, like keeping temperature constant if you are measuring the results of mass on volume of gas. Here's an example, and this is a really good template of what the final paragraph should look like. So the purpose of this study was to determine which urban heat island mitigation strategy is the most effective in reducing surface and atmospheric temperature. It was hypothesized that cool roofs would be the most effective in preventing heat gain due to its high solar reflectance and greater surface area. So there's a real reason for the hypothesis. Additionally, the primary purpose of cool roofs is to reduce UHIs, and they are designed specifically to do so, suggesting they would be highly effective in this experiment. Now, the person doing this goes on to say specifically what their independent variables are. The independent variable was the mitigation strategy, with the experimental groups being sedum roofs, high albedo painted roofs, high albedo painted ground, and moss tree canopies. So they've said specifically the control with no mitigation was no mitigation strategy. So they've done that. The dependent variable were the increases in surface and air temperatures in Celsius. And the null hypothesis stated that the mitigation strategy would have no effect on the temperature. The simulation size and layout, heat lamp type and distance from the simulation, amount of time under the heat lamp, and method of taking temperatures remained constant. So we've covered all of the things that are necessary for a final paragraph. Now here's some basic formatting requirements. It needs to be typed in double-space format. The exception to that is long quotes, figures, legends, and within literature citation, which may be single-spaced. Number 2, it must be in third-person past tense passive voice. Do not use the word the experimenter. So you're not going to say, I measured I measured this temperature. You're going to say the temperature was measured. And you're not going to say the experimenter measured the temperature. You're going to say the temperature was measured. Third person past tense passive voice. Please talk to me or one of your teachers if you're having trouble figuring this out. All margins, top, bottom, and sides are not less than 1 inch. Be sure you set that in your Google Doc. The paper must be 12-point type using one of the following fonts listed here. And the in-text citations are parenthetical citations and match exactly the citations in the literature cited. You need to use the first author's name and et al. For in-text citations of work with more than 2 authors. And when a work has no identified author, you're going to cite the first few words using double quotation marks or headline style capitalization and the year. So let me just show you some in-text citations. So again, you put them at the end of a sentence. That sentence is the one where you got the information, or at the end of a paragraph that you have gotten the information from and paraphrased. You can see there are no quotes, but I put Blanchfield, which is the author, and the year in which it was published. And I can go to my bibliography now and find that. Notice Learn About Urban Heat Islands did not have an author, so it's headline style with quotation marks and the year. And this last one, Aram et al., Aram had, that particular article had more than one author, but I'm not going to list them except in the bibliography itself. And so I can know that it's alphabetized by the Aram name and then 2019. Now, please be sure that you check for grammar and spelling mistakes. You can go to Grammarly.com to sign up if you'd like to use that. But in Google Docs, in Tools, there is a marking for spelling and grammar that you can check. And in Microsoft Word, if you click on under Review, you can do the editor and also do spelling and grammar. And as I said, you can also do Grammarly, and that should help. So an adult or science fair mentor must proofread your work. So whenever you write something, you can miss simple errors that can make your work difficult to understand or make it look like you did not take your time with your work. Have the proofreader look for all of these items. Typos. Use Grammarly or similar programs to check your spelling or grammar, or just use the spelling and grammar checker within Google Docs or within Microsoft Word. Syntax. Make sure the effect of plants on fertilizer, the subject and object are reversed. Plants cannot affect fertilizer. Be sure you have the syntax right. Subject-verb agreement. Be sure that the plural subjects have plural verbs. The data were calculated and tabulated. Data is plural. Datum is singular, so the plural verb was used here. For further help, be sure you're enrolled in the Library Canvas course. That's your source of databases containing peer-reviewed and scholarly sources. They also have instructional videos on research topics and tools. Be sure you are in the Science Project Help course. It'll help you rewatch prior Science Project lessons or to reach out to a mentor through the help course through email or ask a question in the discussion board. Or reach out to your teacher or go to Lunch Lab for help from a teacher or Zero Period. And that is your lesson on the introduction.